Hope everybody is doing well here in Durham, North Carolina. We're trying to keep it dry because there's definitely been some wet weather here in the Triangle area of North Carolina, and that is because of offshoots of Tropical Storm Brett. And I think that it is definitely going through today, and then hopefully by Friday and Saturday it won't be as bad. I do know that I've got some friends that are doing an event at one of our local cultural art centers here on Saturday. It's a food truck type event and all in that space. So I know that they're hoping the same thing, that it won't be as bad, because I think there'll be a few food trucks and some vendors and all in that space. So part of that will be outside. So I know that they're hoping that the weather will pass on through. When I get to my guests, I'll have to find out how things are going there in Tennessee. But I know a lot of folks here are tired of the weather and are definitely tired of the wetness of the weather and all in that space, because it's been going on for about 4 or 5 days straight. I understand that it might be heading up to the DC area for my friends that live up in that part of the country, and they might be dealing with it till Monday or Tuesday. So there is definitely some of this impact that the weather can have on us as well. But in the world news, there's all kinds of things happening. The Russian invaders are apparently being having a U.S. Ukraine struck a bridge on there. That's right. There was a bridge that was supplying the Russian troops, and apparently some of the invaders might have even been panicking after the strike on that bridge to Crimea, according to officials there and all in that space. And definitely it does look like Ukraine has been hit by another wave of Russian strikes as heavy fighting is underway in Donetsk. So that is going on. And there's even been some talk, because I was reading some news talks, that there is talk of the leader even striking or claiming that he might be ready to launch a nuclear strike as well. So that is some of the conversation that I'm hearing as far as Ukraine is concerned and along those lines. And there is some concern, or at least Zelensky is saying, that the Russians are plotting a terrorist attack at Europe's biggest nuclear plant. So definitely the war is continuing to escalate. And I know that when Steve was here yesterday, he was talking about the meeting that is about to take place between Modi and the U.S. and all in that space. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, even though there are some disagreements and some frictions that exist there, including India's concerns as well. So some of their our concerns, I should say, about human rights violations and human rights things that are happening in that space. And speaking of human rights, over there in Honduras, they have handed prison control to the military police. And definitely that was after a massive prison riot erupted as the MS-13 gang clashes left dozens dead in that particular part of the world in Central America and all in that kind of way. So definitely I think that's either Central or Latin America, but definitely that is part of the news stories that we're hearing. And of course, the conversations are continuing between the Secretary of State and the Chinese forces over there. So there is definitely those conversations that are going on. And there was talks about the military bases that are in Cuba. And apparently Biden made a dictator quip that might have complicated some of the thought of that particular relationship. And the Paris summit is aiming to overhaul global financial systems for climate solidarity. So there is a widening wealth gap, and apparently that is driving talks for Green Finance Pact at the Paris summit. So there is definitely conversations around that. And Macron says the global lending system must adapt to fight climate change at that particular Paris summit that is going on as well. And of course, there was a strike there in Israel with the Israeli settlers storming into a Palestinian town in the West Bank as Israeli airstrikes escalated during a crackdown. So that is some of the things that are going on, and we do know that folks are still trying to find that nuclear ship, or that ship that went down to explore the Titanic, and all in that way. So definitely folks are trying to hopefully find those folks, and that they will be safe and sound. Apparently the time clock is definitely running out, as they have been doing that now for a while, trying to find the folks that went on that particular excursion. So we hope that they are able to be found, and found safely in that space. And the Bank of England is saying that they are going to raise their interest rates 5% to curb inflation in that part of the world. So that is some of what we are seeing in the world, and some of the news items that I am seeing, and all along those lines. But we've got an amazing guest that'll be coming on and sharing some of the things that they've got going on also. And by the way, we sometimes talk about migrants and what migrants are doing and our part of the world, but apparently the official death toll has reached 81 in a migrant shipwreck near Greece, but hundreds more are feared to have been killed in that particular tragedy, as a boat capsized that was definitely bringing migrants. It was a super yacht that had given a lifeline to 100 migrants that had been thrown into the sea, and definitely they have rescued some, but others are maybe not as lucky. So hopefully they will be able to rescue even more in that space. So we're going to see how that plays out in world news as well. So that's just some of the things that I'm seeing from a international standpoint. Like I said, the missing Titanic sub is search is continuing, as officials are fearing that oxygen is running out, and definitely ships and experts from across the world are now helping with that particular search effort. So people are definitely using as many resources as they can to try to rescue those people. And I was talking about the weather earlier, and it's not just here in North Carolina, but in other parts of the country as well, because apparently tornadoes tore through a West Texas town, killing 4 people and causing widespread damage. So we do know that the summer months can be some very volatile months when it comes to weather as well. So, and as I mentioned earlier, apparently Biden did call Xi a dictator, and that is seen to be a terminology that might be jeopardizing our and China thaw, and all in that kind of way. And like I said earlier about the weather, Tropical Storm Brett is continuing its path, and that has definitely been impacting our weather and all along those lines. And last but not least, another Supreme Court justice besides Clarence Thomas has a secret billionaire benefactor, and it may be one that has ties to the Roe versus Wade decision as well. So that is something that will be coming out in the news, and people might be talking about that as well. And the Florida judge has knocked down Florida's Medicaid ban on gender affirming treatment. So there's definitely things that are going on in that space. And we've got another person that is joining the presidential race as well. So former Texas Representative Will Hurd has launched his 2024 bid for the GOP presidential nomination. So he called Trump a failed politician as he launched his own GOP presidential run. So as I mentioned a couple of days ago, we've also got that mayor from Miami that has entered the race, and there are a number of other ones that have entered the race as well. But that's some of the news items that I was seeing. But now I'm going to get to my guest, and all in the space. It's a gentleman that has written a book about Bezos. And I know a lot of people are very much fascinated by Jeff Bezos, some of the lessons that he has taught us, and glad we were able to get Steve Anderson on, and he is the author of the Bezos Letters. So definitely, if you could tell us a little bit about the Bezos Letters, some of your own dealings and life as a business person yourself, and some of those lessons that you feel folks can learn from Mr. Bezos and his success with Amazon.
I'd be happy to, Mark, and thanks for having me on the show. Really, a little bit of the background is I've been in the insurance industry my entire career, early on selling insurance to businesses and individuals. And then the last 25 years helping insurance agents with technology. And again, you think 25 years ago, that's when websites were first coming out, and agents were pretty slow to adopt some of those things. So that's what I did. What I realized kind of during that process is that technology continues to develop very rapidly. And I started asking the question, is the biggest risk businesses face actually not taking enough risk? And that started me on a kind of research journey, looking at businesses that were successful and actually are no longer here. And I started asking why, what did they do, what happened, and businesses that are successful and are continuing to be successful. And that's certainly where I came across Amazon as one of those examples. And as I was researching Amazon and trying to figure out, okay, what is it about what they do that has continued to make them successful, I came across the letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos wrote starting in 1997, which is the year they went public. They actually started, first idea was 94, started 95, went public in 97. And I realized that those letters actually contained a lot of information. Now, you may have read shareholder letters from CEOs before. Typically, they're boring, they're touting the company, and Bezos did some of that. But what I realized as I was reading the letters actually in order, there were threads inherent in the letter. Part of it was what Amazon did to grow, what are their core ideas. And my first iteration, or my first kind of step, was to create a white paper of each of the year's letters with just one page, highlights kind of the key points in the letter, some key quotes, and some takeaways that businesses could learn from it. Fortunately, my wife is in the book publishing business, and talked to her about that. And she and the founder of the publishing company she worked for both came back almost immediately and said, this is a book. So that started a long process of, okay, what's the book about and how do I put it together? So that's a little bit of the background. I still am in the insurance industry. I still do work with agencies around technology. And as I've written and discovered some of these growth principles, I believe they apply to, honestly, virtually any business today, that they can use these ideas to help them grow.
And what are those 14 principles? I'm not going to go into all of them, but maybe some of the core ones and everything that you have found that Mr. Bezos has used to have that success that he's had and all in that space. Because I know a lot of people, when they think of Bezos, they'll definitely think about the wealth that he's amassed. And I've even heard some people that have noted that his wealth exceeds that of certain groups, whether that is minority groups or whether that is community groups or a number of other things as well. And sometimes they will use that as a model to say that we, as whatever that group is, can do better and everything. So I was just wondering, what are some of the principles that you have seen him use that others can use as well?
Of course. And again, 14 is a lot, and we can't talk about them all, I suspect. What I did, though, was I grouped the principles into what I call cycles:
Right.
Test, build, accelerate, and scale. And I believe any business, large or small, goes through those cycles continually, right? They're testing a new idea. If you're a startup, and I will say at this point, remind people that Jeff Bezos started like every other startup, in a garage in Seattle, Washington area, taking books that people had ordered online in this new e-commerce. Nobody knew what e-commerce was at the time, and putting them in packages, driving them to the post office to mail them to people. So he started like every other business owner started. So test, build, accelerate, scale, and those are the processes that businesses go through. So I'll pick out a couple probably in each cycle. So in the test cycle, I think the key one there is actually my first growth principle, which is encourage successful failure. And typically you don't hear those words together, right? Successful and failure. It's one or the other. But in Bezos' mindset, you create new products, you you understand the customer, and in order to do that, you have to experiment. And a lot of what you see with Amazon is them experimenting, trying to find out, okay, what is the next thing that's going to work for us and work for our customers. And so what he says is experiments by their very nature mean you're going to fail. And that failure is part of the process. So experimentation allows you to invent, and his phrase is invent on behalf of the customer. And then once you've invented, then you can innovate. And that's frankly why I think a lot of the conversation now around companies have to innovate is actually backwards. I think they have to experiment and invent before they can innovate. And part of this goes into the culture at the company, meaning I don't believe employees are actually afraid of failure. I think they probably understand better than management that failure is a part of the process, but they are afraid of the consequences of failure. And so if the culture at a company doesn't support that experimentation process, then employees will get that message really fast and stop experimenting, which means they stop inventing, which means they stop or slow down growing. So that's a core idea. And I would say a number of these are very counterintuitive in a current business mindset. So embracing failure and allowing failure is counterintuitive. Well, we can't do that. And I would also say at Amazon, they have an intolerance for incompetence. So this is not just, let's just see what happens. This is very intentional, thoughtful process. They try and mitigate, right? Again, out of the insurance industry, this is what we do, right? We manage risk, we try and mitigate risk, we try and transfer risk to an insurance policy, and it's going to happen. Accidents happen, et cetera. So how are you going to, as I say, protect the downside of an experiment and at the same time learn more about how to create something special that customers will really resonate with?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that and all along those lines. You also have a term that talks about return on risk. What does that mean and how does that pertain to Bezos, who I know you have called a master of risk, and other people will definitely agree with that as
Yeah.
well. But what does those terms mean and how can other people use those terms as well?
Yeah, so it's a corollary to return on investment. And again, as a business owner, you hear that a lot, right? If you're going to spend money on marketing or sending out a direct mail promotion or whatever it is, you want to know that the amount of sales you're going to get justifies the expense. So the corollary idea is risk taking actually leads to growth. And that's one of the things that Bezos really understood and used strategically to grow. So that's why I call him the master of risk, because he understands risk as part of the growth process and uses it to actually grow. And again, over the years, we can give you lots of statistics, but Amazon has grown and certainly continues to grow. So that's the idea. Are you thinking as a business owner, yes, this is risky. Then how can I protect the bad consequences of risk taking? And how can I leverage that risk taking in order to increase sales, margins, profits, et cetera? So that's a core idea in this test cycle.
The failure rate of entrepreneurs, particularly in certain businesses like restaurants and a number of other ones, is extremely high and all of that. So, what are some of the things that you think that this book can help people alleviate that? Or is there just going to be a natural inclination for many people to go into business, maybe not have the right plan and have that failure rate? Because I forget the exact statistics, but I do know that certain businesses, namely the restaurant business, will have a number of
Restaurant
friends that
business
are
is
in that.
really high, and a lot of startup businesses are really high. And I think part of it is, um, I think a couple things. One is I think part of it is when a founder has an idea that they think will work, they go full bore in on that. And I think one of the things the book may help with is thinking more about how do we test this idea first before we go forward. And certainly with restaurants, right? Is it all about the food? Is it about the experience that the customer has? And have they thought through all the components around creating a successful business? And whatever the statistics are, the one that's coming to mind is 80% of new business fail after the fifth year, right? All those kinds of things. And often people think entrepreneurs are risk takers.
Mhm.
And I actually question that idea. Are they strategic risk takers, to go back to what I talk about with return on risk, or are they let's just see what happens and go forward? And I think more strategy in their initial growth plan and as they move forward, and being able to pivot. I mean, if they see something's not working, are they testing and experimenting with other things they could do, other paths they could take in order to pivot? And some of the successful startup companies over the years have done exactly that. What they started with an idea wasn't what they actually ended up having that was successful and propelled their growth.
What do you say to those people that look at folks like Bezos or look at people like Musk and think of them as being bad corporate citizens, and sometimes even looking at some of the new toys that they are involved in, whether that is space travel or whether that is a number of other things, and are feeling that that is not necessarily helping the greater good of the world and all of that? Because that is a conversation that I sometimes have and hear from some of my fellow entrepreneurs and fellow folks. They are, proud of the fact that Bezos has accomplished what he has and that Richard Branson has. And I could name a number of others, even some from the sports world, like Tyler Perry with the entertainment world, or LeBron James from the sports world.
Yep.
But they sometimes wonder about if they are doing enough of that, what they call giving back to the community and all in that space, or are they too busy playing with their new toys and some of their new ventures that are in some people's mind, I'm not saying all people's mind, of a selfish concern?
Yeah. So I guess a couple thoughts on that. One is by its size, Amazon certainly is a target. And there seems to be I want to say, growing thought process that big is bad. You certainly see that in the administration. And in fact, kind of one of the latest news items is the FTC has
Mhm.
filed a complaint against Amazon for their Prime membership.
Right.
And one of the allegations is that they do. This is my word, not the complaint's word, because I haven't read the full complaint yet. But they do dirty tricks to get people to sign up for Prime, and then they make it really hard to cancel a Prime subscription. Now, um, Linda Khan, who's the chairman now of the FTC, since she was a law student, has been very vocally against Amazon as being too big and it needs to be broken up. And I'm not going to get into that. I think it's an interesting idea. Um, and it actually takes a change in our um, um, can't think of the right phrase I want to use, are monopoly laws. Those laws historically, I mean, from the beginning have been customer focused. And, I would argue Amazon does a great job with their customers and improves what they have. I think they demonstrated that to a great degree during the pandemic. But it's not a customer, the change seems to be they're just big, therefore they're bad. Part of what's interesting, and I was just doing some research because I'll probably be writing an article about this before we jumped on. I did a Google search for how to cancel Prime subscription, and I got a whole page of Amazon links, right? So Amazon actually has links, information on their website on how to cancel the Prime subscription, plus a whole bunch of others. So I personally think it's almost irresponsible not to have a Prime subscription. And, again, I also have to say, Amazon's not perfect. So are they doing some things that they shouldn't? I don't know. Maybe. And I think oversight, regulation, government oversight is a function that's needed in our economy. So that's a bit of a rambling answer.
No problem. And along those same lines, you said that you were mentioning the monopolies, but I do know in the past there have been monopolies that have existed, like the phone company when they broke those up and all in that space. There's the famous Bell cases and all in that kind of way. And then we've got the smaller companies that are more regional, and definitely a lot of them. And there have been even talks in the media landscape, a landscape that I know well, that there are concerns that they may need to be broken up as well, because a lot of times the Live Nations and the Clear Channels in that space are the governing forces, and there might only be like 2 or 3 of those that are controlling everything from the venue to the media outlets to the artists themselves, and there have been concerns about that. So I was wondering, as a insurance person, a business owner yourself, what are some of your thoughts about that? Is that something that needs maybe some new regulations or some new things in that space? I was just wondering your own thoughts about that.
Well, and I think that's part of the conversation right now. Is a big business bad? I think it's the first interesting conversation. And like I would say your Live Nation, the concert ticket, we've seen the fiascos around Taylor Swift ticketing and some of those kinds of things. And I guess in my mind, I would see that more as detrimental to customers, not improving customers' experience. And I do see a bit of that difference in Amazon if I'm comparing those two. I don't know. I don't have all the answers to that. It would be interesting to see, how this plays out. And I'll even go back to your example of the, AT&T breakup into the baby bells, right, that were called at the time. Did that actually improve the customer experience? I would argue, I think there could be an argument, I'll say it that way, that it didn't, that it did break it up. And by its very nature of the type of business, scale makes a difference, right? So having, I'll use a current example, having fiber optic cable for internet access costs a lot of money. It's a lot of infrastructure. And, what is it better that it's broken up into smaller companies, or that there's a larger company that has more resources to put into that infrastructure? Now, I will also go back to a comment you made, and I'll just quickly interject this, that, for you said, mentioned Musk and Bezos, and a little bit of Branson there, but I would say Musk and Bezos right now, and their space ambitions. I think both of them, that is a passion project, not just a revenue. Now, they need revenue to pay for it. But when we look at, and what triggered my thought was this, fiber optic high-speed internet, both SpaceX and Blue Origin are moving pretty rapidly on satellite-based internet that is high speed and low cost. I actually have a couple of friends now that have the SpaceX internet access, and they say it actually works really well. So could a small company do that? So that's kind of my example of there are some things that a large company can do better than a multiple small companies. So we'll
I'm glad
see.
that you brought up. I'm glad you brought up fiber optics because, as I mentioned earlier, when you came in, one of our founders, Kim Calhoun, is an engineer by trade and was actually involved in that space, having been one of the creators, as my understanding, which he can explain it better than I can, of the fiber optics here in the Carolinas and all in that space. So she definitely knows a little bit
There she
about the
is. Hi,
fiber
Kim.
Hi,
optic
Steve.
system and all in that space. So she definitely is aware of what is going on with fiber optics as she was tied into that particular industry, but she may have some questions as well. And I'm gonna bring in some of the other panelists also, but just really quickly, and then definitely want to hear from Kim as well. Do you think that there is room for there to be another Amazon? Because I do know that sometimes people look at something like an Amazon and they wonder if there can be another company that is like that, or is that not going to be able to be scaled or recreated as a real competitor because they do have a unique model. But I was just wondering, do you think that there is the possibility of growth and the possibility of there being a counter to Amazon?
Steve.
Steve.
Oh, you're not talking. I thought you were talking to Kim. I'm sorry.
No problem.
That's okay.
Actually, so again, I was thinking of answers as you were asking the question. I think it's less likely. Here's why. And Bezos pointed this out very early on. In fact, his first 1997 letter to shareholders, he said, this is day one for the internet. And again, remember 1997, my first domain I registered in 1996. Didn't really know what to do with it. 1990, again, they registered a domain in probably 95. The internet was brand new. And one of his beliefs at the time was that it was kind of like a land rush. That's the example I'll give, meaning there's huge opportunity. So let me finish the phrase. He said it's day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. So at that time, nobody knew you could buy stuff over the internet. There were a few fledgling little sites. What Bezos did, though, was really bet almost everything on growing rapidly in order to, do I say corner? In order to grow that internet presence, because he felt strongly, I think he was right, that the faster you grow with e-commerce, with the internet, the more likely it is that you'll be successful. Now, let me also say, if you remember the early 2000s, probably 2001, 2 maybe, we had the internet bubble burst, right? Where all these startup companies that didn't have a business plan, didn't really have any idea how they were going to monetize that internet, were gone, and very quickly. Amazon survived that as well as several other kind of financial crises, partly because they reinvested everything they made, all profits, back into infrastructure. So early on, the infrastructure was fulfillment centers. And so Prime first started in 2001, 2002 as a way to offer free shipping to customers, because that was a friction point for customers. You and I both know we abandoned carts, right, online when we get to it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to ship it. Well, Bezos wanted to remove that friction from the customer. And his senior leadership team said, this is crazy. We can't do that. We can't afford to pay for shipping. And what he said was, if it's better for the customer, it will be better for Amazon and our shareholders. But that required a significant investment in infrastructure, fulfillment centers, transportation. I've had the opportunity to visit 2 different Amazon fulfillment centers, go through them, tour them. It's amazing. It's an amazing operation. And if you ever wonder what happens from when you click buy to it shows up on your porch, that was billions of dollars and years of experiments and testing and refining the process, so that now, depending on where you live, it may not be 2 days, it may be 1 day, or it may be 1 hour, because they've continued to build and develop that infrastructure. But can another company come in? They're trying. Look at Walmart. Look at Target. They're trying. It's just that head start that Amazon has specifically with fulfillment. Now, Target and Walmart have an advantage there because of their physical store infrastructure, right? Now people can go there and pick it up versus it being delivered, which may be what grows and what provides Amazon with more competition. So kind of 2 sides to that question or that answer.
No, I appreciate that. I'm gonna bring in Lee Newton Rhodes, who might have some questions as well. Kim, if you've got any, definitely go ahead and ask them. And we've also got Sasha Starr, who is in the investment space, has also got his show about Ukraine and Russia and China and all in that space. But definitely on Wednesdays, he talks about modern investment. So I know he is an investment person, and he may have some thoughts about Jeff Bezos and Amazon as well. But definitely, I'll turn it over to you, Kim, and see if you've got any questions, and definitely if Lee or Sasha have any questions for Mr. Anderson as well.
Any of these people who have become so successful, are in that huge limelight. And I love reading about their stories or learning more about them. I started companies, so some of the things that you state are very true. I've got a book written on it about, the startups and the struggles that they go through, how many actually do survive when they do get kicked off. But one of the things Jeff Bezos had that should be written about was his wife, McKinsey. He would have never, ever done this if it had not been for her, but foremost, her expertise in books and how to make this run. And when they first started, very, very important element of this is she was very much into books and very much into how to make all of this get organized. And she took the wheel while he took the passenger seat, and she made it happen. None of Amazon and the greatness and the easiness of what we use today to shop would have existed without her. He, of course, gets the limelight and he's on the cover of Amazon, but actually it was Mackenzie Scott that made it all happen and work. But I don't blame her for not wanting to be in the limelight, because she's living a life of pure happiness without a lot of all the other problems. So you go, Mackenzie. I also was very much in the same realm of, I hired my own PR people. I just wanted to be in the back and not be in the forefront. I just wanted to make sure the business ran. And that's what she did. And I've read several stories about the success of this. And a lot of people don't have that partnership in someone, or that teamship in someone that gives you, 100, 200% of everything you need to make it happen. And that's what gaslighted this success and boosted it into outer space for Amazon. Again, he would not be where he was or is today without that particular element in his life. Not many people get that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you along those
I
lines.
hope that you put, a couple chapters in there about that. That's something I write about in my book is, what it takes here to become a successful entrepreneur in a startup is, that startup is your significant other. And you need the family needs to understand that this is where you're going to be, but both of them were there. Both of them.
Well, and Kim, I have to say, I absolutely resonate with. There are a lot of as you say, stories about McKinsey, especially the early years, and how she helped and supported. And actually, you're right, it wouldn't happen because Jeff asked her, I have this crazy idea. And she said, let's go for it. Now, that I'm not quoting her, but she was very supportive when they were in New York. He had this crazy idea, leaving a very good job, right? And they were newly, I think, a year, maybe 2 years married, something like that.
They
So
both
yeah, very
left
much.
their jobs for
Yep.
this. They both quit their jobs. They both worked on the business plan. They both went to Seattle. She understood books more than he did because she started writing when she was very young. So they both gave up their life of security and made huge sacrifices and gave tremendously, and literally it is stated more than just by everyone that worked with them. She took the wheel for a very, very long time and made it happen. It's not to say she could have done it on her own either. I'm just saying it takes that's a good element, Spark, that you've got the support from other people in your life, because it's a very long and hard struggle, a very hard and long struggle.
So I will say, if you look at the cover of the book, my wife's name is also on the book. And so I very much understand I could not have written this book alone. Karen and I worked together mostly happily. We had some times, but I absolutely resonate with that because that's my experience with my wife, Karen, in terms of our partnership to actually get this book published and out into the world. And it's had a success that I would never have had on my own.
Right. Did you go through Amazon?
Well, it's available on Amazon, but we
There you
did not
go.
publish through Amazon, of course.
Yeah. Along those same lines, and Lee may have some questions as well, but I do know that Sasha is in the investment space. I don't know what his thoughts are about Amazon as a investment, but he can tell you. I'm not one to put people's words in people's mouths, to borrow that expression and everything. But Sasha, are there any things that you've got to ask about this book about Bezos, and what are your own thoughts about Amazon as a business and possibly an investment? Because I do know that you are an investor right now. You're really high on NVIDIA and all in that space. There are a couple of other things that you are high on as well in terms of investments, but definitely, what are your thoughts about Amazon as a business model, since you are in that business space?
Well, Amazon today, it's not just the name of the company. It's something much bigger than we can imagine. It's a way of life, a way of running business, a way of communicating. And what bothers me is that there are a lot of talk about unjust high compensation for CEOs, founders of the companies, presidents, and so on. And now talking about the sacrifices what Bezos and his wife had, and their vision and their determination, their talent, um, then what is exactly justifiable level of their compensation? Is there any formula 20 to 1, 10 to 1, 100 to 1, maybe a million to 1? Because now tens of thousands of people are working for Amazon, and there would be nowhere if it wouldn't be for their sacrifices and determination and so on. I would like to know, Steve, what's your opinion on this subject?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, I have a couple thoughts. One is, again, in that original 1997, he wrote about employees and the importance of finding the highest quality employees. And what he said there was that employees should act like owners. And if they're going to act like owners, they actually need to be owners. So one of the things Amazon did early on was weight compensation to stock options instead of actual cash. they're having a struggle with that now, right? 'Cause again, stock went down. Maybe that's not as much of an incentive, but for Bezos, his wealth comes from the stock of Amazon. And Kim, kind of back to your comments about McKinsey, one is, and this relates, one is um, I guess I want to say disappointed when the divorce was announced. Because I had seen that partnership. I had seen her in the background, him up front, right? All of that going on. So, and we actually had rewrote some of the book because of that. Second point is, I was really interested in the settlement, the divorce settlement, meaning she obviously got a lot. So she got stock. I mean, I won't go through all the details there, but the thing that was interesting is she got the stock, but he retained the voting rights. And even at that point, they were working together. And I wonder, I have nothing to back this up, but I wonder if that idea that you talked about early on carried through to the ultimate divorce, where he retained control of the stock, which he might not have had she pushed that point. And so that was always interesting to me. So I think back to the question is, what's the right compensation? I actually think Bezos' I don't know right now. I'd have to look it up. But his compensation is stock, not salary. And I would also say, kind of back to an earlier comment, Mark, we talked about in terms of kind of the negative with Amazon. One of the negatives you hear, certainly here in the US and certainly parts of the world, is how Amazon treats its employees, right? And I would say that it's interesting to me. It's always talked about employees versus fulfillment center, which is really what people are talking about. And as I said, I've been in two. Yet it's a hard place. I mean, it really is. It's called a warehouse. I wonder that. I'm actually doing some research right now, kind of in my insurance. Is it really a warehouse or is it a production line? And because, again, it's very automated, et cetera. Back to that original comment about how important employees are. Amazon raised their minimum fulfillment center wage to $15 an hour 2 to 3 years before anybody else did. States, cities, et cetera. They were an early adopter. In fact, I think they helped push that forward. And when Amazon comes into an area, there is a documented effect called the Amazon effect, which is because of Amazon's pay scale, because benefits start the first day of employment, because of their other programs like Career Choice, they offer and pay for education on behalf of employees. Now, there's some time limits there. Either, I think, 6 months or something like that. But all those things affect the area, and the effect is it raises wages for everybody, regardless of whether they're working for Amazon or not, because now they're competing, right, for similar employees. So, Sasha, I think that's a good question. And again, I'm more entrepreneurial. So my thought is, why do we punish people who are successful by putting these other requirements on there or saying? The other comment you made, I think, was they're not doing enough. And again, I would say Amazon has done a lot. Bezos has done a lot. And I'm wondering, I have no facts, I'm wondering if his move to executive chairman and stepping down as CEO was more corollary to Bill Gates and putting more focus on his passion projects, be that Blue Origin, be that the homeless. His, Amazon has a part of one of their buildings in downtown Seattle that's a homeless shelter. I mean, so again, I think they work and try and support all kinds of different things. They're doing that in Virginia with their new headquarters, et cetera. So I think it's an interesting question. Can somebody make too much? I think that really
Yeah, that's the core of the question and
Well,
everything.
I want to address this issue in a way that, our country's founded roots are based on free enterprise. And we do regulate some things that are for the truest, or we're supposed to anyway, for sustainable solutions and resources for the people. But, Amazon doesn't provide any of those resources. They just provide commercial retail resources. And because of them, and something that people have not looked at, yeah, they've got a lot of employees. They've got that make decent money. I disagree with it improving the economy of wherever it moves to. I have my reasons why it doesn't. Just like when Google moves in, I just go, ooh, I cringe. But what it did do and continues to do is allow other people to gain their wealth through being able to distribute through Amazon. Because as Nick and I have learned, one of the key important elements of success in most businesses is distribution, exposure of your product and distribution. And Amazon offers very much equal ability in both, where people can get on there and sell their product a lot easier than they could have through the US mail or UPS or anywhere else. And they also advertise very well. So, people became best booksellers because of Amazon, more on a self-editorial and published way. So, Amazon they may have monopolized this space, but this space can be taken by somebody else. I don't think it needs to be regulated. I think gas needs to be regulated. I think many other elements in our lives need to be regulated. I think we need to go back to regulating telephone companies and ensuring the quality of, the services that are provided for things that provide for our emergency and resources. But I don't believe that a commercial entity should be regulated. I just don't.
Hey, Steve, along those same lines, and coming back to something that Sasha said, I sometimes wonder about the regulation aspect and how that regulation would work. So what are some of your thoughts about that? Is it something, how would we regulate something like Amazon if we were to regulate it? And I kind of agree with Kim that we might not need to regulate it. And ironically, sometimes you even get these titles within Amazon that I don't know where they came from. Like I think I mentioned on this show before that I was once labeled, and I think I still have the label on Amazon, as an Amazon influencer. And the best I can tell, all I've done is maybe tell about a couple of my friends' books and everything, but I don't even know how I got that ranking of being an influencer and in that space in the Amazon lane. But I'm not going to knock it, and I use it sometimes to help in my own marketing and everything, but I'm still not 100% sure how that ranking came about and all in that space. But I was wondering your thoughts about that and how those things happen sometimes.
Well, it's a little hard for me to answer that question because I agree more with Kim in terms of, I think I lean toward more libertarian. I'm not one, but I think the system we have now works pretty well. I think there are some areas, and I think oversight even into Amazon and is probably appropriate. Do we break it up? Well, how do you do that? I mean, and AWS is kind of over here. Yeah. The logistics, the e-commerce is here. Now physical stores, right, and grocery, they're experimenting in healthcare. They have hands in a lot of different areas, and so you break all that apart. Well, I think if you do that, then in my view, you would destroy the benefits that all of that has. And Kim, I really like you're highlighting Marketplace, the third party seller part of Amazon, and that actually was also took 3 different tries before that became successful. And what a crazy idea, letting your competitors on your own website, a place you've built, paid billions of dollars to enhance, and now you're letting third parties. But here's what Bezos said about that. He said, if a third party seller has a product that we don't have in stock, that's better for the customer. If they have a price lower than what we can offer, that's better for the customer. And if it's better for the customer, it will ultimately be better for Amazon. I think you've seen that in terms of millions now of small businesses being able to operate because they don't have to build the infrastructure network. And that's also smart on Amazon's side.
Mm-hmm.
They have the infrastructure. The incremental cost of adding more people is very small, so they can make more money on the fees that they charge for the marketplace. So no, I can't see right now any regulation that beneficial to consumers for Amazon.
Hey, Lee, any thoughts? You've been sitting there quietly and everything, so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on this business level.
Yeah, I do, Mark. First, I'm amazed. I have a background in inventory management, how they're able to handle, forget about the software, the electronic part and stuff, like the physical movement of these goods from the manufacturers to the warehouse to the customer. It's amazing if you just think about what's going on and how quickly it's done. Separate from that, recently, Amazon workers unionized. Do you want to comment on that, how that's worked out?
Well, I would say a small number of Amazon workers have unionized, and Amazon has been very vocally against unionization. And, I get asked, why are they so against unions? And from their perspective, it adds a layer between Amazon and their employees that they feel is detrimental to Amazon and to employees. And again, I won't repeat what I said in terms of all the things they try and do for their employees. And they've also, there have been more, I don't know if that's true, so I won't say it. There have been other examples where union organizations have failed because employees didn't vote for unionization. So that will certainly be an ongoing issue for Amazon and for employees. And, the current administration is very much union focused. So there's a lot of regulatory, what's the right word? Work being done now. I'm trying to think how I want to say this. I'm thinking of NLRB, some latest rulings. It can't, Amazon can't do anything right now in terms of employees, et cetera. How that will work out, I have no idea.
They built such a big, the amazing thing that they built, this company with no unions successfully is a testament that maybe their unions are outdated.
Well, I think that's certainly a great question. We certainly have seen union membership continue to fall over the last number of years. And, I think, were unions needed at some point in the past? Probably. I think with the increase in communication, increase in us knowing what's going on, I'm not convinced, I'll just say it that way, that unions are as beneficial today as they might have been in the past.
Yeah,
in the age of the sweatshop.
Yeah, it's along the same lines of questioning and everything, Steve. How important do you think it is for a corporate citizen to be socially responsible and all along those lines? You kind of alluded to it a couple of times. And even when we think about people in the athletic and the entertainment field, they will sometimes be accused of not giving back to their community, but sometimes we don't know necessarily what they are doing. Like you just mentioned, the homeless thing or the homeless shelter that Amazon is involved with in Seattle. I'm sure everybody in Seattle knows that, but I don't know how widespread that knowledge is and everything. So how much of that responsibility is there, and should they make it more publicly known and everything? Like I said, I've heard this argument that, say, the NBA players or the NFL players are not giving back to the areas that they came from, but we don't necessarily know what investments they're doing. We don't know what things they're doing in their community because they don't always make a public announcement about it. Sometimes they do it in a very quiet manner, whether that's given to a nonprofit or creating shelters or creating a number of other things. So I just wondered your thoughts on, one, the social responsibility of corporations and how public should that be?
So I'll address the first one first. I wonder why we have added this requirement on successful people that, we expect them to give back, I think is the phrase. And the second part of that is, I believe more people than we realize actually do, but they don't want the fame, notoriety. And I know for myself, and again, I'm just speaking from my personal experience, there are a lot of things I do that nobody else needs to know about. I don't need the accolades. I don't need that recognition. And I support a lot of things that, my wife knows about, and that's about it. Obviously, we've put a different requirement on a successful athlete, a successful entrepreneur, a successful business, to be more vocal about that. I'm skeptical of that personally. And again, there are lots of arguments, of why it's useful and helpful, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely, and everything. I know we're winding down and everything all along those lines, and we're actually going a little bit over. But definitely, Steve, if you can share a little bit about your own background, and definitely if you can tell folks about this book. We've alluded to some of the things that are in the book, but if you want to go into some more of the book and also tell folks how they can get the Bezos letter and anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to touch on. And ironically, I was just wondering, in your conversation, you did all this research on Mr. Bezos. Did you ever meet the man himself? And if you did meet him, what was your thoughts about him as an individual and all in that space?
So I have not met him. And early on, I realized I'm not a reporter. My focus was looking at the letters and what he wrote. So I actually talked to a few people from Amazon, but that was not my focus. And frankly, there are some really good books of actual reporters who did a great job. The Everything Store, Stone, I can't remember his first name right now, is a great book kind of on the early history of Amazon. He's written a second one kind of on the later history of Amazon. So if you want kind of the details and what happened when, those are great books to do. So the book, and I'll just show get the right angle here. That's the cover. And that is not Jeff Bezos. That's an actual stock photo that we licensed. So it is available on Amazon. It has over 600 4.5-star average reviews. It's published in 19 different languages. And so if you're someplace else, you might be able to find it in your own language. Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller. The book website is thebezosletters.com. And there you can find some more information about the book. And one of the things I did at the end of every chapter was I asked 2 or 3 questions, because my goal was to help business owners actually do something with the information, not just have nice stories. And so there's a workbook there that you can get to kind of help you work through some of those. And again, 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale, 14 principles total. So if you want to connect with me, steve@thebezosletters.com is my email, or LinkedIn is my primary social platform. And I have a pretty large following there. And if you listen to this and connect to me on LinkedIn, let me know, and I'll be glad to connect with you.
Sounds great.
Thank you. I think we need to wrap there.
No, just really quickly as we're wrapping, I was going to ask, Steve, because I mentioned this at the beginning with our bad weather and everything. Has the weather hit Tennessee yet? And how are you doing in the rain, if it has hit Tennessee, or have you avoided it? Because I do know that you are based in Tennessee and all in that space. So has the weather impacted you as of yet?
It's been raining some, but not significant, and not major thunderstorms and tornadoes, nothing like that in Middle Tennessee, which is where I'm at.
Sounds great. So hopefully you'll come back in the near future and share more of your business knowledge and business wealth of information. Glad to have you on this particular show. And I know we'll be on Friday. I think Steve will be talking about the Modi visit. And of course, we'll have the more conversations around Ukraine and Russia. And of course, we'll also have the Ukraine, Russia, China show on Friday as well. But definitely get ready to get on out of here. And I think this has been a great conversation. Steve, I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope that you will make a return trip as well.
Mark, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Pleasure meeting you. God bless.
Bye bye.